What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, I'm going to be replacing the starter in my 66 Mustang with a new unit from PowerMaster. Now this starter itself is probably overkill for what I'm doing, and it's definitely overkill for the stock 289 that I have in here, but I've got some plans and I want to be set up for that. So what I want to do is I want to pull the old starter out and put this new one in, but before we do that, we need to do a couple things to the starter to get it set up and get it ready to go before we can do that. Let's head over to the bench real quick and take a look at the parts. So the starter that I chose is it's the 9503, and this is, again, probably overkill for my application, but what I'm going to need down the road is something that's more powerful than just the stock starter that we have on our car. And then what we've got here is the instructions that they include, and the most important thing on here is checking the clearance of the pinion of the starter to the flywheel, the teeth on the flywheel. So we're going to go over that when we get there, but that's probably the most important part of this. And then it's kind of slick because they even explain, you know, the wire gauge size if you need to do that. And then they include a data sheet on how the starter performed, which is awesome to have that kind of information, especially for those that need it for, you know, like race applications and stuff like that. So then we have, oh, here's the shim, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll take this out. Oh yeah, look at this thing. Oh, it's beautiful. All right, so this, clearly it's so light. I think it's like 11 pounds or something like that, and the one that's in the car is 20 some pounds, so we're gonna be cutting the weight in half with this new starter. And another thing I like about this is we can adjust this, you know, take these two screws out and we can spin this thing 360 degrees so that when it bolts into the bell housing, I can put this system wherever I need it to be. You know, if these were fixed, you know, if this needs to be sitting up here or down here or out that way, whatever it needs to be doing so that it fits with my headers and my oil pan. I do like that adjustability on this stuff because these are designed to be kind of universal for most motors, for a lot of motors. I like that I can make it fit for my car exactly. So now on the front here, this is where we need to get do a little bit of prep work before we get set up. In the Ford car, there is a starter solenoid mounted to the passenger fender well and the fender lining inside the engine bay. And I don't want to, you know, bypass that solenoid setup. You can, and we can run a battery cable from this terminal straight to the battery, and then have this be the, you know, the ignition for, you know, triggering this setup. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is use just a jumper wire to go from here to here, so that when we do start the car, the juice coming in from the starter solenoid will just come to this terminal, it'll activate that terminal, and then go ahead and activate the starter just like normal. This is something that they put in the instructions. They talk about that, you know, about jumping the terminals here, which is perfectly fine to do. I'm going to do that so I can keep my stock set up in my car. So what are we going to do to get this set up? All I need is just a couple of some ring terminals here and just some healthy wire. They say to use at least 12 gauge. I think this might be 10 gauge, so it'll work for this one here, and I'll just trim it down a little bit to make it fit with this one here. And we'll just make a little loop just to go from, you know, basically from here to there with a little wire in there. That'll jump that, and then we'll just use the regular starter cable that comes from the solenoid down to here. So let's get that part made real quick, and then we'll start taking the starter out of the car. Now we need to get the car jacked up so we can get underneath there and get that starter out. All right, once you get your car safely up on jack stands, we can go ahead and start removing the starter. What I like to do is take the terminal off, the starter cable off first. That's just a 1/2 inch nut up there, so we can use a wrench for that. And then we've got two 9/16 bolts, one on the top and one on the bottom of this starter. So we'll want to pull those out, and then we can pull this starter out. I should probably point out that there's nothing wrong with this starter at all. It's just not going to be enough for what I need to do, what I would like to do, what I am doing down the road. So we're going to just save this guy because you never know. But this starter's fine. The new one's going to be awesome though. Now before I put the new starter in, I need to go through and I need to measure the distance from this edge of the teeth on the flywheel to this surface here. And then I'm going to measure the same surface on the starter to the end of the pinion and make sure that the gap, so on the instructions, the gap says it needs to be 0.10 inches to 0.25 inches gap between the flywheel and the end of the pinion. So let's measure that real quick. All right, so we're just going to take some calipers here, and I'm just going to measure again from this surface on the flywheel where the teeth are to this surface here on this block plate. So I'm just going to reach this through here, and I'm going to touch this end to the back of the flywheel where the teeth are here, not the back of this flywheel here, but on the teeth, and then rest this edge on here. All right, now hold on to it, slip it around, and it says 0.71 inches. Let's measure it again just to be safe. And that one says 0.705 inches. So all right, that's fine. We could take that. Now let's measure the pinion on the starter. So when we mount this in the car, this surface here is going to be on the block plate, not this surface. We want to measure from here to the tip of this tooth. Because I can't reach from here to there, I'm going to measure from here to there and then just add this difference here. So we'll do the same thing that we did on the motor. We'll just do that there. Okay, so we've got 0.515. So let's add that here. So 0.515 plus 0.162 is 0.677, and if you recall, on the motor we had 0.71. So if we do 0.71 minus 0.677, we're 0.033. That's too close. This, based on the instructions from PowerMaster, this gap needs to be 0.10 to 0.25. We're at 0.03. So what we want to do is add a shim. And this is that shim that they included. And how much is this guy? So that adds 0.62. So if we add that to here, 0.062, oops. Oh, no, did that wrong. 0.03 plus 0.062, 0.92. So if we put this shim inside here, it will space this piece further away from the starter, which shortens the exposed pinion, and then we can put this in the car. So let's take this off and get to that shim. So we're going to use a T25 bit and take these screws out of here. Now if we take this piece off, we want to add this shim on here like so, and then we can put this piece back on. Now because I took this apart, I need to, when I put these screws back in, and they say I need to use some blue Loctite, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put the screws in and just kind of hold everything in place, and then we can figure out, you know, if it needs to mount into the motor. I think it mounts this way. So we can position the starter wherever we need to so that it fits with everything underneath the car, which is fantastic. I like that option. For now, we'll just put this back on here, and then we're gonna remeasure, just kind of see how everything came out. Okay, again, so we'll just measure from this front plate here to the teeth, which is 0.426, plus we want to add this distance here, 0.163. All right, so that's the new depth from the face of this tooth, the edge of this tooth, to this surface along here. And remember, we had, well, let's do this as 0.71, 0.12. And I know it's minus, but it's okay because we did the math problem. Here, I'll just do it right. 0.71 minus 0.583. There we go. So that number is within this allowance, this tolerance that we have. So now this thing, this pinion is spaced correctly for my motor, which is perfect. This is what you want to do in your setup. So now we can put this in the car, but first let's go in there and kind of put it in place and see where this stuff needs to go. Keep in mind, in fact, right here you can see that I've got that, this is in the way of this bolt, so I can't have this thing positioned that way. I'm gonna have to move it a little bit so I can get access to that bolt. All right, guys, I fiddled around with this for a few minutes trying to figure out the best position for this starter so it's not touching anything. And if I leave it right here, so this is lined up with the bolt holes, you know, down here and at the top, and it's gonna clear the steering linkage here. It says this thing turns, this actually goes up and down just a little bit as it turns, but that's okay. And then if you notice, if I rotate it a little bit, it hits the block. So, but now I'm out of line with the bolt hole, so I know that I can twist it back a little bit. I'm in line with the bolt holes. I'm not touching the block. So I think from here, this is a good spot. I can get access to these terminals here, but the downside, the only downside with this position is this bolt hole for this top. And I can't get the socket in there. In fact, I can't even get the bolt in here with this in the way. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is take this off, put the bolt in here, and then put it back together, and this bolt is gonna be kind of part of this thing, and then when I go to install it in the car, it's gonna be sticking out, you know, like this, and I'm gonna have to just tighten up that bolt with a wrench, turn by turn, as I continue to drive this in, because any other position, you know, with this thing, if I move this around, it gets too close to the steering linkage, and it might be fine, but I can't, I'm kind of limited on where I can put this setup here. So this will work, so I'm gonna give it a shot. Also, I noticed that by doing that, I found out that the marks on this plate here line up with the holes. So when I take this back apart to put that bolt in, I know that I'll know right where it goes because that mark's already on the plate here. So put it back together, get the Loctite on those two bolts inside here, and then we're ready to put it in the car. All right, so now we got the Loctite on those, and this is what that bolt looks like, kind of captured in this plate. So I can't take it out. So again, patience is going to be required when I'm removing this starter for anything, but looks like it's the best way to make everything fit. The next step is to get the starter cable hooked up to the terminal here, but look at that. I'm like an inch short. Oh gosh. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of jokes to be said with that, but this cable is stretched as hard as it can go from the starter solenoid to the terminal here, and I just can't quite reach it. This has probably been a good time to mention, maybe you should double check your starter cable length before you do this. So now I'm gonna run to the store and grab a longer cable. All right, I got back from the store. You know, all they had was a red wire for this type of battery cable. It's fine, it's not what I wanted, but it'll work. So the other cable that I had was a 32-inch cable. This one is a 40-inch cable, and it's a little too long, but they didn't have a shorter one. I think a 36 or 38 would be ideal for, at least for this setup. But anyways, so now we can go ahead and put this on the terminal here, and then put the nut on. Now this is, they use metric hardware on these starters, so you're going to need a 13 millimeter socket wrench or a wrench for this terminal. There's no reason to over tighten these things. Just tighten it down good and snug. We don't need to strip the threads on anything. So, all right, that's good to go. That's in place. I think we can go ahead and drop the car. All right, everything's in place. I think let's go ahead and start the car and see how it came out. All right, guys, that's it. It worked great. It should. I mean, you should be able to go ahead and plug it right into your car and not have any issues. It's pretty simple wiring. That cable I was telling you, that starter cable, I think I just put some black loom over it or something like that, and that'll clean it up and it won't be so obvious. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I think the black one would look better. But other than that, again, so this starter, it's a little overkill for my operation for what I've got going on right now, but fingers crossed that this starter will do what I need to do down the road. So guys, that's it. That's how you install that. That was a PowerMaster, the Torque XS or XS Torque, whatever it was called. The 9503 is the part number. It says it'll do up to, I think, like 14:1 compression or something like that, or something like that, but way overkill for what I've got right now, but we'll see down the road. So guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.